welcome to the David Icke Videocast. Well, as you can see from the title, I'm going to go into some rather strange and deep areas this week because a lot of people laugh at me, not that I could care less, because some of the things that I say are happening are not something that most people ever come across. But we actually live in two worlds. And if you live in one world, you probably won't come across a lot of this. But if you live in the other, then it's commonplace. It's the way things are. Because these parallel worlds that we call human society have one in which the vast majority live and think of it as the real world. This is how things are, mate. Then there's another world which actually controls the one that people think they live in and believe is so real. And the two are not the same. And you see this other world, this controlling world, in the form of royalty, elite families, the 1%, as it's called. But that's just the surface of this other world. If you go deeper and deeper into it, it gets very bizarre indeed. And this is why we have these networks of secret societies. Yes, on the lower levels and the outer levels of them, they use secret societies for manipulating in business and a bit of that, like the Freemasons and stuff. But if you go deep into these secret societies, and particularly into the seriously elite ones, then you find that their reason for being is to manipulate the world that people believe is real from the one that's really controlling, and also to keep hidden from the real world the one that's doing the controlling. And it's funny because, you know, when you get into this other world, that's when you hit demonic entities. That's where you meet reptilian entities and greys, as they're called in UFO research. That's where you meet these non-human expressions that are controlling the human world and manipulating the human world. And what's funny is that the real world that people think is all there is so controlled in terms of information that people mostly receive throughout their lives, through education and the media and all these other forms of information, that people become programmed like software to see reality in a certain way, and to, by reflex action, dismiss any other explanation that's outside of the mainstream, i.e. the program. And so, even though up to the 1920s, mainstream science believed that there was one galaxy in the universe. Now some of the latest estimates are as high as 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. Although if you take mainstream science's projection of the size of the universe and you see that by comparison to that, planet Earth is the equivalent of a billionth of a pinhead, despite all that, the real world program says any idea of life other than humans out there, not actually some of it out there either, down here, is ridiculous. It's a joke. All ghosts are a joke, even though stunning numbers of people have had ghostly experiences and they've been documented on camera and all that stuff. Oh no, ghosts? You don't believe in ghosts, do you? That's ridiculous. No, that's not ridiculous. That's the program. That's the press enter program. Ghosts? Oh, that's ridiculous. Reptilian entities? Oh, that's crazy. People being possessed by demonic entities? Press enter. Oh, that's ridiculous. This is the way the program in the real world operates to keep people not just oblivious, but dismissive of this other parallel world that's actually controlling everything and manipulating the direction of human society. And it's a chuckle, really, when you think, and it's certainly a chuckle for that which is doing the controlling, when they observe the target population, or great chunks of it, laughing at the existence of that which is doing the manipulating. It's like people sitting in a prison cell and denying the fact that there are any bars or there any prison at all. But there is. And the human prison is this parallel manipulating reality that's interacting with the perceived real world. Now, my books aren't short. This is my latest one, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. And the reason they're not short is because if I'm at the second part of the book, talking about the geopolitical situation and how it's manipulated, and all these other things, banking systems manipulated, how climate change by human activity is a hoax, and all these endless other elements of human society, the artificial intelligence agenda, which is massive and completely connected to this other controlling world, by the way. That's where it's coming from. But before I get there in the books, in the early part, to make sense of the world of the scene, we have to understand what this reality is. Because if we don't, we can't understand anything. And lots of these things that I talk about, like reptilians, possession, other non-human entities, the fact that this so-called physical reality is an illusion. What I'm saying about the moon is not what we think it is, that we live in a virtual reality universe. Actually, on one level, it's a simulation, just like a massive computer simulation. When people hear me talk about this and don't look at any of the background evidence, their press enter reaction is, that's a load of rubbish, that's not possible. But what they're judging that on is their perception, for example, that this world, this so-called physical world that we think we're experiencing, is actually physical, is actually solid, is actually what it seems to be. And of course, this controlling world wants that to be the case. That's why the nature of reality as it truly is has been so systematically kept from us. Because once you understand what this reality is, then these apparently impossible things, including shape-shifting, people changing shape, become perfectly logical in terms of people understanding why it's possible, how it's possible. But if we think the world is solid and everything is apart from everything else, and it's all happening by random chance, well then, of course, you're going to dismiss these apparently far out concepts. So let's look at reality. I go into it in much more detail in the books, obviously, and the talks, but let's just look at it in its basic foundation. This world is not solid. It's holographic, illusory, solid. And the whole foundation of this reality, this universe, if you want to use that word, is its foundation is a waveform information field or fields. You can think of it as Wi-Fi because the principle is just the same. If I was sitting in a room here now with Wi-Fi, then where is it? If I said to people who didn't know about computers, in this room is an entire reality that you can lock into anywhere in the world and access the same collective global reality called the internet. People who, if they didn't know about computers or the internet, would say, that's mad, mate. Press enter. Oh, that's crazy. Stupid. Where is this world? I can't see it. But because people know about computers and the internet now, when you say, oh, there's a Wi-Fi field and you can connect, oh, yeah, I understand that, yeah, Wi-Fi, computers, yeah, internet, yeah. And the only difference between load of rubbish and, oh, yeah, I understand that, is information. And what's lacking, which is why people are kept in this perceptual servitude, is information about the very reality that we're experiencing. Because if we don't understand that, we can't understand anything, can we? So it's like a Wi-Fi field. And what does the computer do? It locks in to the Wi-Fi field, connects with it, and depending how it's programmed and where it's connected to, it takes that Wi-Fi field information, that waveform radiation field, and it turns it into decodes it into a completely different reality on the screen of the computer. Because the only place the internet exists as you perceive it on the screen is on the screen. Everywhere else, what you see on the screen takes a completely different form. It's Wi-Fi information fields, it's electronic codes, etc., etc. And in the same way, the only place that this world exists as we perceive it, this physical world, is in our heads. When our biological computer decodes the cosmic Wi-Fi field, what I will call the quantum field of possibility and probability, in to the world that we see. And the principle is exactly the same as a computer decoding Wi-Fi and putting the Wi-Fi on the screen in a completely different form to what it's being decoded from. So the same thing is what we are doing. So what do the five senses do? They take waveform information and they turn it into electrical information, communicate it to the brain, which then decodes it into holographic stroke digital information. And that's the world we think we're experiencing outside of us, but actually it's in our heads. And if you look at sound, look at the ears as a classic example. Look at what sound is. It's waveform vibration. And the waveform vibration is decoded by the hearing senses into electrical signals, which are sent to the brain. And only when the brain decodes those signals do we hear something. As I'm speaking now, what's passing between me and people listening to this video is actually waveform information generated by my vocal cords. And only when the receiver decodes that in the way I've described do people actually hear the words that I'm saying. So if the world is not solid, but illusory solid, I mean, things can seem very solid in a dream, can't they? But where's the dream going on? It's going on in here. But no one claims that the world of their dreams is actually solid. Oh, it's the dream world. Well, this is the dream world. It just seems more tangible to us because of the way we decode this as being awake. So if the world's not solid, then suddenly so many things become possible. For instance, the body is also an information field. Some people call it the auric field. The auric field is an information field from which the body basically is decoded. Of course, the body only exists when we decode it as well in this form. When it's not in this form, it is an information field. So when we talk about, say, shape-shifting, so many people, not just in modern times, but all the way throughout history, I've talked about, and so many have told me about it all over the world. They've experienced seeing someone change shape and change back again. Now, and this brings us to possession, which is all part of this as well. We are operating within a frequency band of perception that is ludicrously tiny. Do you know, according to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum is about 0.005% of what exists in the universe. Some say it's a bit more, but not much. And visible light, which is the only frequency band that we can see and decode into this world that we think is so real, is a tiny fraction of the 0.005%. So people are saying, that's no rubbish, that's not possible, while perceiving a smear of the 0.005%. And beyond that smear is the infinity of reality, all of which, apart from that, we cannot see. Now, a number of things come from this. First of all, there are other entities that operate. I mean, do you think there might be a chance that when we can see and perceive only a smear of the 0.005%, that beyond that there might be other forms of life, never mind within the smear of visible light when you look at the night sky? Imagine the scale of life that's going to exist beyond this infinitesimal fraction that we can actually see. And just as radio and television station frequencies can operate in the same space without interfering with each other unless they're close on the dial, so all these other realities that exist within infinite reality are sharing the same space, just like radio and television station frequencies. We are only perceiving one tiny band of frequency. And so there are endless other expressions of life operating outside the frequency band that we can see. So when people say, well, where's these reptilians then? I can't see them. They operate overwhelmingly outside our frequency band. What about these demonic entities? They operate outside of our frequency band. They can enter it, and people see them, but they usually operate outside of our frequency band. And Therefore, when people say, I saw this UFO and it appeared out of nowhere and then disappeared into nowhere, or they say this entity just manifested in front of me and then disappeared. Of course, press enter says that's a load of rubbish, that's not possible, but it's perfectly explainable, for goodness sake. The UFO, or the entity, has entered visible light frequency, and suddenly we are decoding that information field now, because it's in our frequency band, into something that we see. And it's just appeared in our frequency, so we start decoding it, and it appears that it's just come out of nowhere. And then it leaves our frequency, the UFO or the entity, and we can't decode it anymore. And to our observation, it's just disappeared into nothingness. But it hasn't. It's just left the frequency that we can decode and perceive. And in terms of possession, these entities lock in to our waveform, if you like, auric field, information field. And they start, through that connection, to influence people's perceptions, people's emotions, people's thoughts. That's how it operates. Of course, the whole thing about possession has been going on for a long time. And in fact, there was a story this week, very quickly, before I go on. Demons really are possessing people, warns psychiatrist. It's an Ivy League educated psychiatrist convinced there's a growing epidemic of demonic possession in the world today. Dr. Richard Gallagher, he boasts degrees, it says here, at Princeton University and Yale University, and says, despite conflicting opinions within mainstream medical science, most of which is press enter, by the way, in fact, the vast majority, demonic possession, says Gallagher, is both real and rampant. Well, I've known that a very long time from my own research in more than 60 countries. And what happens is, you know, like in these like exorcist movie type possession situations where the person's face starts to change. I've seen it happen. Nobody's saying, well, it's the theory. I've seen it happen. What happens is the information field of the possessing so-called demonic entity, and some of them are, they lock into this auric field level, this information field from which the body is decoded. And they start, if it's a tenuous or less powerful connection, they start to influence thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. But if that connection gets more and more powerful, what's happening is the information field of the possessing entity starts to infuse its information field into the possessed field to such a point where it starts to change the nature of the possessed field. And the observer who is decoding this field in the way I've described, from the waveform level through the five senses to the electrical, to the digital holographic, to the observer, that person will be changing shape. His face will be distorting. And people say that can't happen because you can't have a physical solid body distort like that or change shape. Well, no, you can't. I'm the first person to say it. But the body isn't solid. It's an information field which we decode as we decode this entire reality in the same way. And thus, when the field we're observing, in this case, a person being possessed, changes, so what we decode changes because the information field before us is changing. And thus we see people, in terms of demonic possession, their faces change or distort. And in terms of what I'm talking about with these reptilian entities and other non-human entities, they can change shape fully into these other entities. And people say, he was human, mate, and then he turned into a reptilian and then back again. Press enter says that's not possible because you can't change a solid body like that. No, you can't, but the body's not solid. This is the whole point. And this is why understanding reality is so vital to understanding what the hell's going on in the world, and why the suppression of the nature of reality has been so systematic, and why talking about things that are actually happening are crazy. The person's mad. That's ridiculous. Because once you accept it's happening, then the way reality works must be completely reconsidered to explain how it can be happening. And there are particular bloodlines that have been encoded by these non-human entities manipulating human society. Reptilian is a major one, but there are others too. There are bloodlines that have been encoded in a way that they are partly, in terms of their information field, these, say, let's talk about reptilian entities, and part a human field. And the human field is the one that they project in everyday life. They have to, because if they didn't, then people would see reptilians walking around the frickin' street. We might have an idea something might be going on if that happened. So this human field is being projected, and that's what people see. But as I've been told chapter and verse by so many people in countries around the world who've attended these satanic rituals that these bloodlines get involved in, rituals in which they're interacting with their non-human masters, by the way. That's what this whole satanic stuff is all about. They have the ability to move that human field to the reptilian field. And they appear in these rituals, these real deep inner circle rituals, as what they are, which is basically reptilian, as what part of them is reptilian. So, for instance, one of the things that can get them to make this shift in a situation where they really don't want to can be fury and great emotional extremes. Because if you think of fury, just feel a fury, you can feel an electrical charge going through the body if you get so furious. And that electrical charge, if it's powerful enough, can make this shift happen, however briefly it may be. And that's often when it's been described to me, that someone was in a fury, that they saw them shift. Not always when they're in a fury, no, but often it's a common theme. Because of this electrical charge shifting the stability of these fields. And what happens is, first of all, the person is looking at the human field. And the person looks human like they always have done. And then there's this shift, and the reptilian or other non-human field becomes the dominant one. And to the observer, they start now decoding that. And in the holographic construct in our heads, which is what this world is, to the observer, it appears that someone's just changed shape physically. But that's not what's happened. It's an information shift. And these bloodlines, these hybrid bloodlines, were seeded, were encoded, I think it's a better word, to represent this manipulating force, reptilian to a large extent, in its manipulation of human society. Because the reptilian and other non-human entities stay out of human sight for many reasons. One of them is to keep us in ignorance of what's going on, keep us in this this bubble of ignorance about what world is, what's happening in the world, never mind who's controlling it. And these bloodlines, these hybrid bloodlines with these dual information fields, they represent this force in the human frequency band. And that's where royalty comes from. What does royalty claim if you go back through history? It claims the divine right to rule. The divine right to rule because it's a special bloodline. You talk about blue bloods. The ancient emperors of China used to claim the right to rule because of their descendants from the serpent gods. And this is a theme you find throughout the ancient world. And when the point came that these ruling royal bloodlines were being rejected by the people, as people said, no, we don't want to be controlled by royals anymore, these bloodlines went out of in-your-face royalty and aristocracy and into the dark suit professions of politics, of banking, of business, of media ownership, etc. And they've gone on representing this force ever since. And today we call these people the elite or the 1%. And of course, some royal families, like the British royal family, the Adams family, are still overtly royal. But this is where it all comes from, this divine right to rule. It's a connection to the gods. But what are the fricking gods? Well, I explain what the gods are in my books. So when you come from observing the world from this perspective, the world looks very, very different. And of course, people who are still in press enter mode, which is the vast majority still, not least in journalism and politics and all these other professions, academia, science, though it's changing among the population. More and more people are opening their minds to this and seeing it. But when press enter people are faced with these things, of course, they laugh. And fortunately, I have a personality that doesn't give a shit. Laugh at me all you like, couldn't care less. I'm interested in what the truth is and what's happening and what we can do about it. I'm not interested in a statue and a round of applause, thank you very much. The truth will do me. And if we're going to find that truth of what's really happening, we've got to break out of the programming of how we see the world and realize that what we have perceived to be the real world is not real in any way, shape, or form. And that this real world is really being manipulated by another world that's very, very different. And this other world force has an agenda for humanity. Interestingly, not by accident, these reptilian entities are obsessed with technology. Their god is their technology. That's how they control. It's their controlling weapon, technology. Anybody thought of where this technological explosion has come from? That is doing what? Taking over the human mind, not least the young. Rewiring their brain. That's what these technologies, these smart technologies are doing in ways and for reasons I explain in the books. And it's leading somewhere, and it's always been leading somewhere, to the point where the human brain, mind, is connected to artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. This is what Silicon Valley is all about. It's why it's been created. It's why it has so much power globally now. And you ain't seen nothing yet. We let this go on. Who ultimately controls Silicon Valley? Who has created Silicon Valley? This other world that's controlling this one. It's where the technological knowledge has come from that's driving it. So more and more technology is coming out, more and more advanced, quicker and quicker and quicker, which is leading, as they'll tell you in Silicon Valley, quite openly, to the connection of artificial intelligence to the human mind. So it becomes the human mind. And why are they telling you? Because their sales pitch is, it will make us superhuman. No, it won't. It will make us post-human. It will make us artificial intelligence computers on a global version of the internet. Now here's the question. What is AI? What is artificial intelligence? I hear people say all the time, artificial intelligence this, artificial intelligence that. They're taking over weapons, they're taking over this, they're taking over that, taking over the other. Yeah, because there's takeover. Human society has been taken over by artificial intelligence. I mean, hello? But what I don't hear is, but what is it? Well, there's levels of artificial intelligence, which I might call algorithmic artificial intelligence, encoded artificial intelligence. Then there's a level of artificial intelligence that they call strong AI or learning AI, which is learning more and more and more, not least through the data being trawled from human society, which is allowing this AI to learn and learn and learn. But then there's another level of AI that's controlling the other two. And I'll tell you, that AI is non-human, and it's a force that's been manipulating human society, the force that's been manipulating human society since this hijack happened. And so, if we allow our minds, our brains to be connected to artificial intelligence, we are allowing our brains to be connected to this reptilian and other non-human force that has manipulated humanity to build its own technological prison, which not too far from now, because out of Silicon Valley come years like 2030, when the human mind will be assimilated or begin to be assimilated, is already happening, into this non-human consciousness that takes a reptilian form and demonic forms and other forms. And that's what's really happening. And that's why they want you to laugh at this stuff. They want you to dismiss it. Press enter, rubbish. Because they don't want people to realize the truth, which is this. The world is not just a little bit not like people think it is. It is nothing like people think it is. And we better get that in our heads pretty damn quick.